Hey guys, this is Matthew with Disarm Harm. I've gotten a lot of questions over the last couple of weeks in regards to how we do effective research methods and how we go about actually researching material for psychology. So I'm currently creating a database of information of open access, publicly available scientific literature for this website, as well as these courses, because I have, a big love affair for open access material. My mentality is that in Canada, for example, the Canadian government is already paying for the libraries, they're already paying for the scientific journals, they're already paying for or assisting in the student loans associated behind sending students to school. They're already paying professors to do the research. And I'm a big believer in that being open to the general public. It would appear that there's a little bit of a paywall issue behind general psychology. So to hell with it. I found an open access textbook, reached out and noticed that they had a copyright, attribution, non-commercial, share-alike license to begin the process of creating courses in research methods. And further, I believe that educating the general public on research methods in psychology is also the fastest way for us to disarm the harm associated with what is termed iatrogenic therapies, or when the therapist actually harms the patient, inside of the rampant romanticism and belief systems that I see present within the coaching / consultant pseudoscientific community. And we're going to be covering a couple of those topics today inside of this course. So let's begin. First off, research methods in psychology. So the first thing I want you guys to do is I want you guys to actually go in and download this textbook. It's Research Methods in Psychology. The text author is Paul C. Price. Now, this course is being created under the Creative Commons copyright of attribution, non-commercial, share-alike, which means that it is being modified in a way that allows us to recreate this content for a free course. The textbook was given to us free at no charge, and this course is being given to you for free at no charge. If you want to go to https://open.umn.edu, you can find this textbook here, and I'm not even gonna pull you guys away from this. Let's talk. All right, let's see what we can come up with here. Open.umn.edu. You can tell I've used this portal a couple of times. Now, this is a really cool, there are 973 open textbooks, and they get updated on a very regular basis, you guys. So there's a movement inside of academia right now in regards to what is going on. You can go and get everything from humanities, religion, education. You want to learn about law, there's topics in law in there. But we are going to go into psychology. So you can do Introduction to Psychology, Principles of Social Psychology, yada, 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 yada. And what you are going to do is you are going to open up the research methods in psychology. So we've got this inside of here. And what you can do, there's a Creative Commons license. You can go in, you can get the PDF, you can get the ebook if you want to get the ebook. It is available right here. And you can physically download a copy of that yourself and save it to your very own Dropbox. It's really important that we end up encouraging this kind of thought using these kinds of resources, because your government is already paying researchers to do the work. They're already paying the journals to give us the journal copies. They're already paying for all of this. Why the hell are they making the general public pay for journals? I have no idea. It doesn't make sense. If the government's already paying for it, why can't we just give it to the public? Money. Anyways, the Science of Psychology, Chapter 1. We are going to get started here right away. So get your notes, get your information, and we will get rocking and rolling. Science of Psychology. So there was a claim that was done, and it was a really cool study. It was actually the claim that women speak on average twice as much as men. I'm sure some of you have heard this before. The belief was that women actually statistically spoke twice as much as men. So a gentleman named Meal decided, you know what? It was Matthias Meal. He was like, you know what? We're going to test that. We're going to see if it's actually true. What they did was they did what was called a naturalistic observation, and they sat down and they physically counted the words by strapping a camera, a voice recorder to men and a voice recorder to women, and systematically counted the number of words that they used in a given day. What they found was that women spoke an average of 16,215 words, and men spoke 15,669 words, which was a difference of 3%. Now, there's this thing called a R value or statistical relevancy inside of psychology. A difference of less than 5% is, at least in the psychological sciences, is considered statistically insignificant. So 3% is statistically insignificant. The difference of 3% proved that it was not statistically relevant, and that the claim that women spoke that much more than men was completely disregardable. A brief history of science. The Maoris actually used techniques before Europeans that were similar to the scientific method to generate knowledge. For example, they used understanding lunar and solar calendars for harvesting. The Paracau, and I'm so, don't be offended if I mispronounce these. The Paracau and the Maramakatika knowledge was a hypothesis. It was examined by collecting data and tested, and this would be updated frequently. You can find these resources inside of your textbook. The concept of scientific thinking that we know today actually occurred in the 11th century in the Islamic world. Psychology, unfortunately, does have a poor history of biased research that was ultimately and incorrectly called science, and that is actually something that seems to persist to this day. Most people are actually surprised to learn that psychology has left the field of introspective thought and taken on a scientific perspective. The I think, therefore it is methodology of psychology is kind of, that's done. Just because it's going on in your head doesn't actually necessarily mean it's true. We have these interesting things, or these interesting phenomenon in social psychology specifically, which is the field of study I like to specialize in, which is called belief perseverance, in which we have a thought and then we tend to seek out resources, people, communities, those kinds of things that supply that, and they don't give us the ability to think critically. But psychology today has taken on a scientific perspective. If we compare this, to example, to like astronomers, biologists, and chemists, astronomers who study the physics behind celestial bodies, biologists, the biomechanics behind, well, anything related to biology, and chemists who watch chemicals do their thing. They observe the natural world. However, they don't use the same tools, the same language, or the same techniques. A biologist and a chemist are going to use radically different tools from that of the typical, somebody who specializes in field versus the other. And an astronomer, I mean, I don't think a biologist knows how to use a radio telescope between you and me. So it's just one of those things. Why would they need to? Doesn't matter. Doesn't make it any less a science. Psychology does take the exact same general approach, except we explore one aspect of the human world, and that is human behavior. So the scientific approach actually has three fundamental features. The first feature is systematic empiricism. Basically, it's learning based on observation. Learning about the world systematically by carefully planning, making, recording, and analyzing observations. The second is empirical questions, or questions about how the world actually is and can be answered by systematically observing it. And then the third, about the 1-2-1, the creation of public knowledge. After doing steps 1 and 2, scientists go on to publish their work. It's actually a social process, so it's a large-scale process amongst many researchers who conduct what's called a peer review. This peer review allows scientific evidence to be self-correcting, and publication allows the community to question and correct these assertions over time, increasing our knowledge of our known worlds. So it's experts correcting experts, correcting experts, correcting experts, increasing the knowledge of the scientific world. What is completely frustrating about this is that these journals who charge you, $15 for PDFs or thousands of dollars a year for a subscription, they typically do not pay the reviewer. They also don't pay the scientist who submits the work to the journal. And they get subscription fees from universities. So it's kind of a messed up system, to say the very least, where there's not a lot of money going out from these journals, but there's a whole ton of money coming in from government resources. Taxpayers are already paying for this. Why the public is being charged for this information, I still don't know yet. I will find out. Science versus pseudoscience, and we're going to go over this. So pseudoscience refers to the activities and beliefs that are claimed to be scientific by the proponents. They may appear to be scientific at first glance, however, they are not. So, for example, the theory of biorhythms, and this is not to be confused with sleep cycles or other biological cycles that do have a scientific basis. The circadian rhythm is a scientifically proven phenomenon. It is the idea, this theory of biorhythms, is the idea that people's physical, intellectual, and emotional abilities run in cycles that begin when they are born and continue until they die. It's got no scientific basis to it whatsoever. You can find many resources on the topics of biorhythms. It's actually been around for about 100 years, and people even use what we call in the scientific review, the pseudoscientific review, is psycho or narrow babble in order to make the material sound smarter, such as sinusoidal wave and bioelectricity. The problem is that there's no good empirical reason to think biorhythm exists. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I was taught early on this year specifically was that if you're trying to sound smart, it's probably a red flag that you aren't smart. If you can't distill what you are talking about down to the simplest common denominator and explain it to a 10-year-old child, then you don't know the material that well. Test to pseudoscience. So beliefs or activities can be said to be pseudoscientific if it is adherent, claim, or implies that it's scientific, adheres to the claim that it's scientific, or implies that it's scientific. It lacks one more of the three features of science, systematic empiricism, empirical questions, or the creation of public knowledge. If this knowledge or this belief that you even have in your system does not meet these three criteria, the chances are really good it's pseudoscientific. The second is that it doesn't address empirical questions. So Karl Popper, he was a philosopher of science, was concerned about this especially. He stated, any scientific claim must be expressed in such a way that there are observations that would, if they were made, count as evidence against the claim. In other words, these questions must have one important feature. You got to be able to prove it wrong. If you can't prove it wrong, then it's not scientific. And why should we be concerned about pseudoscience? Well, there are three reasons. It helps bring the fundamental features of science and their importance into sharper focus, which means that anything that is scientific, it brings it into a much clearer image. The things like biorhythms, psychic powers, astrology, and other pseudoscientific claims are widely held, and they are still widely promoted on the internet, TV, and books and magazines. And the promotion of these beliefs are harmful. I'll get to that in a second because it's really important that we talk about that. Many pseudosciences purport to explain some aspect of human behavior and mental process, so biorhythm, astrology, graphology, and magnet therapy for pain control. It's important that we distinguish this from what the field calls pseudopsychology. So, can pseudoscience be harmful? The answer is abso-frickin-lutely yes, it can. I will go over a few examples, or I will go over just this example, and then I want to give you guys a big, broad picture of the problem behind pseudopsychology in particular. But this one really brings a very clear image into focus of what I'm talking about. So I ended up pulling this resource, the 7 omens that you might be going through what the pseudopsychology community calls the dark night of the soul. This is taken from lonerwolf.com. They might take this down if they see this. I don't know. Here are the 7 omens that you might be going through the dark night of the soul. You feel a deep sense of sadness, which often verges on despair. The sadness is often triggered by a state of your life, humanity, or the world as a whole. You feel an acute sense of unworthiness. You have the constant feeling of being lost or condemned to a life of suffering or emptiness. You possess a painful feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness. Your will and self-control is weakened, making it difficult for you to act. You lack interest and find no joy in things that once excited you, and you crave for the loss of something intangible, a longing for a distant place or to return home again. Now I'm going to compare that to the symptoms of major depressive disorder. Feelings of sadness, tearfulness, emptiness or hopelessness, anger, outbursts, irritability or frustration, even over small matters, loss of interest or pleasure in most normal activities such as sex, hobbies, or sports, sleep disturbances including insomnia or sleeping too much, tiredness and lack of energy, so even small tasks take extra effort, reduced appetite and weight loss or increased cravings for food and weight gain, anxiety, agitation, and restlessness, slowed thinking, speaking, or body movement, feelings of worthlessness or guilt, fixing on past failures or self-blame, trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions, and remembering things, frequent or recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal thoughts, suicide attempts, or suicide, and unexplained physical problems such as back pain or headaches. Here's the issue that we have in pseudopsychology that we have to contend with. So there is a large body of, we'll call them coaches, I don't even want to give them that are completely irresponsible with the ethics or the maintenance of the ethics of their patients, of their clients. Truth be told, most coaches, life coaches, coaches that are being promoted online, I think they think through this concept of belief perseverance, that they are helping people. And that's the problem. They think they are helping people. They believe the pseudoscience, therefore others should believe the pseudoscience. Common psychological phenomenon. Many people have heard of it. Most people don't know how to apply it in their day-to-day lives. So here's the issue. If I am Sally and I have $500 in my pocket and I have to choose between going and seeing a psychotherapist that is $250 per session or going and seeing a coach that is $125 per session, well, I am thinking as a consumer, you know what? I don't know the difference between a psychotherapist or a coach, and many people don't. This is something I'm working on as a study, actually. I'm statistically measuring the evidence behind this claim. It's not true yet, or it hasn't been discovered yet. It's not something I'm making as a premise. But we can assume through educated guesses that most people don't know the difference between a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a coach, a counselor, or a psychiatrist. They just assume that all of these people are good. It's fine. They're all charging me more than $100 an hour and away we go. The problem is that Sally has this belief inside of her head, and Sally goes and sees her coach downtown in her hometown, and she starts getting some help, right? I ended up going through this very process. It's one of the reasons why my research is centered the way it is. It's because I ended up investing a good chunk of change into the coaching process and self-help books, and I ended up actually hurting myself a little bit further than I should have. It took a lot of skilled help to be able to bring me back from that pain, but at the end of the day, I had to go through the process, and now it's inspiring me to do this. But Sally goes and spends her money, and she gets more sessions because that's how she perceives it. Now, there are lots of problems in terms of the model of what's going on in mental health right now. The first is that psychotherapists are expensive. They're $250 an hour. It's bloody expensive. It's not relatively or widely included inside of the Canadian mental health spending plan or the mental health spending plans across the world for a lot of countries. I think in France it's about 17% of their society. Britain spends about 20%, and they just created a two-tier counseling model for mental health help to give people access and reduce their wait time for mental health down to about 2 weeks. But the thing is that we don't have a system like this inside of Canada. The wait times in Toronto are about 2.5 years, and it's problematic. So here's the thing. If Sally goes and sees her coach, and her coach says, oh, you're just going through a dark night of the soul, and reproduces this pseudoscientific nonsense, Sally goes home, and Sally is not actually, she's now under the belief that she's just going through a dark night of the soul, and give it time, it'll get better. Give it time, it'll get better. Give it time, it'll get better. If you just keep coming back to coaching, if you just keep meditating, if you just keep sticking these crystals up your butt, it'll get better. Don't worry about it. Sally doesn't get better. Let's say Sally kills herself in the process because she's dealing with major depressive disorder. Her serotonin levels are low. her H5 receptors inside of her amygdala are not firing at the correct correspondence that her body needs for her serotonin reuptake systems to really work themselves. H5 receptors, by the way, are just a serotonin set of receptors inside of the amygdala of the brains of rats, and what we're finding specifically in dealing with things like acetyl-lilipram and cipralax, which are SRNIs, which are antidepressants. I've noticed in a lot of the recent scientific literatures that pharmacologists, what they're doing is they are taking these chemical compounds and seeing if they can reinvigorate the serotonin reuptake or the serotonin uptake in the minds of these rats. So just a little side tangent. But Sally goes and kills herself, and this could have easily been prevented by Sally simply going and seeing somebody who is qualified to do this. But no, Sally ended up going and seeing a coach that was not qualified to recognize that Sally may have been dealing with something deeper, a coach that was not qualified to recognize that Sally may have had something more severe going on. And I can't really blame the coach, because society is currently perpetuating stuff like the dark night of the soul to the general public, and it may be causing a lot of harm to the most vulnerable of our society. I'm still studying it. We're still going through it. It's something that I am intensely fascinated by, as you can tell. But the thing is that we have to be able to distinguish between pseudoscience and science within our own belief systems. And if we have a pseudoscientific belief within our own belief systems, then of course we'll be able to test this out with these services that we ultimately do buy and make a decision that is good for ourselves. All right. Other pseudoscientific terms before we close out this video. Cryptozoology is the study of hidden creatures like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and the Chupacabra. Pseudoscientific psychotherapies. Now, there are a lot of shitty psychotherapies out there. Past life regression, rebirthing therapy, bioscream therapy, magnet therapy, those bracelets. There are like 600 therapies out there, and there's no FDA for therapies. So it's one of the things that we have to pay attention to. Homeopathy is the treatment of medical conditions using natural substances that have been diluted sometime to the point of no longer being present. And pyramidology, it's odd theories about the origin and function of the Egyptian pyramids. So, for example, that they were built by extraterrestrials. I mean, they could have been. I'm kidding. I haven't looked into the science behind this. And the idea that pyramids in general have healing and other special powers with no proof. Well, pay attention to some of these things. All right. See you in the next video. Take a little bit of a test. I gave you guys a quiz in this course. Enjoy. Talk to you soon. Bye.